All right. So next up, we just talked about how sports performance training might be different as we get older. So talk about the types of training that maybe 40, 50-year-old athletes should avoid. And we can add in at the end what they maybe should do, but let's start with what we should avoid.
Yeah, I think the big thing is the intent and the understanding to not rush. Like, give yourself time. Don't rush into things, because I think that's where most people go wrong.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so you want to start running and you go out and you haven't ran in, even a year or two in your 40s, and you go out and decide, I'm going to run a 5K, and you haven't ran in a year, what are your shins and your feet and your knees going to be telling you at the end of that, right? Most of us too, again, we don't really warm up very well. We'll warm up in the first mile, I'm as guilty of this as anyone at times. And so, making sure that, you are not rushing into anything you're doing. I think the other things, again, preparing yourself for the demands that the task requires. I think one of the big issues you'll see a lot of elderly people rush into, so to get a little bit more into some...
Hey, we're talking 40 and 50-year-olds. Yep. All right, so come on, man.
So 40 and 50-years get into...
I don't call myself elderly yet.
Sprinting or running. Like I said, running's a big one, because the forces that we have to put into the ground, each step and each stride we take, it's multiple times of our body weight depending on how fast you're running. And so do I have the tissue tolerance? Do I have the joint tolerance? Do I have the range of motion to handle all that?
Right. So
I think typically you're going to see more issues and more elastic or ballistic and dynamic movements early on. Like you're running, you're jumping, you're sprinting, something that's more dynamic. But those are important to not avoid, but to build yourself into, because, as you age, again, I don't want to go too far elderly, but, one of the big things that does limit people is they break a hip or they, from falling. And so do I have the quick twitch response to catch myself in a fall, right? If I don't have the quick twitch response and I don't train how to train quickly to react quickly, then, I become much more resilient to injury. And it's something that I mention this because if you don't do it in your 40s and 50s and don't start until you're 60, 70, 80 years old, you can still see progress. It's still better than not doing it. But if you start in your 40s, 50s, and even before, you see even greater benefits. The longer you start something and stick with it, the better benefit you're typically going to have from it. And so if I start at my 40s and 50s, now I'm setting myself up to be more resilient, as I get into the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I have better bone density. I have better tissue tolerance. I have more elasticity in the joints. I have better range of motion because I haven't been locking myself up through those positions for a while. It's important that you move through as full a range of motion as possible. The greater range of motion you move through, we release synovial fluid from the spine. That is lubrication of the joint. And so if I'm not doing these things in my 40s and 50s, it's going to be much more difficult to do, in my 60s and 70s. I was actually talking to my general physician about this just this past week, and some of the issues he sees. And he was talking about, some of the common things that you're seeing, but they're at a much younger age than they used to be. Type 2 diabetes, he just diagnosed someone at 27, I think, recently, type 2 diabetes. Type 2 is totally lifestyle inflicted. Some people may have a higher disposition, so I don't want to say there's not genetic variables involved, but type 2 can be controlled by lifestyle variables. And you typically don't see that or didn't see that, decades ago until you're 60, 70, 80 years old. But this guy's already prescribed insulin, right, at that age. So, but it's the thing, the issue he has. Another guy had a heart attack and he warned him about a month in advance. Like, hey, you smoke 2 packs a day, your blood pressure's like 180 over 130 or something like that, something crazy high. And he warned him, hey, you're going to have a heart attack. The guy's like, I'm 37, I'll be fine. And it was about a month later, he had a heart attack. And we want to wait until something serious happens. We have that kind of oh crap moment that says, I need to get my stuff in check now or it's going to get real bad. Well, if you can start doing those things earlier, you avoid that oh crap moment.
Right.
And that oh crap moment, you may come out on the positive side, but you might not. You like to think if you have a heart attack at a young age, well, I was young, it's rare, it didn't happen. But if I treat my body like crap, can my body come back from that? So I think that's really important with a lot of adults is working on the things now that you're going to face when you get in 60, 70, 80 years old. And if you can't do those things now, avoid them for the now, but build yourself into being able to do them.
So it sounds like avoid doing nothing. Like
Correct.
that, we frame that through avoid. But I think And the other thing that you shared is like ballistic movements, like right out of the gate, or like running or going full into the thing without some buildup. I think one thing I mean even add in there too is training intensity and frequency.
Yep.
Coupled with like recovery and rest.
Yep.
Where I think 40 and 50 year olds, like I being one, and like working with a lot of them and training with a lot of them, it's kind of it's easy to categorize, like it oversimplify, but you have two different kind of mindsets. Like one mindset is just this go so hard, 10,000 RPM mindset, which I feel like I'm more aligned with, where the harder thing is programming recovery and rest. So I need to be more intentional about it. Like I have to take that way more seriously than, did I go hard enough? I rarely ask myself that question, and then it's like, well, how many days should I work out, or how long should I go? More is always the right answer, right? To those
Typically.
people. On the other side, you can have not enough. And then your expectation is here, but your training volume and intensity is way too low for an outcome that you want, because they maybe hang on too long for the babying phase. We're like, all right, you're walking now. You're walking. You can run now. I think I like walking. I think I'm going to walk. Well, then we need to recalibrate the performance outcome that you're hoping for and all those things. So I think that's another avoid, is like going too hard too long, because I'm looking at 20 somethings, 18 somethings to try to like calibrate. Well, I could probably still do that. Like it's this ego leading instead of this ultimate outcome that I'm there for.
Yeah. Well, I think Will Fleming is a good resource on this. He's based out of Bloomington, Indiana. But he works with a lot of youth and high school performance athletes, but he also works with a lot of masters Olympic weightlifters. He holds masters world records in, I believe, the 35 to 39-year-old class. I don't think he's competed since he's gotten his 40s, but I could be wrong on that. Don't shoot me, Will. But anyways, he has a guy that I want to say he's in his mid-late 40s that, I mean, he's crushing numbers in snatch and clean and jerk right now. He's been doing it for really the last year and a half, 2 years. But he has a lot of good information on masters training. They can tend to handle high amount of frequency and intensity, but you have to have a significant reduction in volume. And so that's where a lot of things go wrong, is we want to go hard and then we want to do a lot of it at once. And it's like in masters, if you actually just go up and kind of touch really hard and then just step away or back away, you can see really great adaptations from that. Now, just like everything else I mentioned before, you got to set that foundation first. Like this guy didn't just jump into snatch in 330, right? But he does now. Well, I believe actually well over that. I don't know. Anyways, masters can tend to handle intensity and frequency high. It just can't be very much.
You heard it here first. Old man's strength is real, and old woman's strength is real. All right, let's transition that. This is a good crossover point.